What about this send them to the sanctuary cities thing?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, the play on the name of the show, State of Mind, is something I don't think about very often now that we've been doing the show 5.5 years, you know, but there are days when I think, what is my state of mind? And you should know that on Friday, for your Friday evening production that you're watching, and thank you for choosing to do so, that we record our Friday shows on Thursday. And I say that a lot because I want to make sure that everybody knows that we, you know, we're not going to be up to date necessarily on that which is happening. And I will tell you, with the Trump administration, it can be a challenge because we tape in the early afternoon on a day-to-day basis. And still sometimes, by the time you watch the show, things can be factually obsolete. So know that with all of the now news cycle running around from yesterday's release of the Mueller report, that last night we attempted to stay current with that, with Professor Joe Camerano. Tonight we are going to have a conversation on what was a prevailing conversation from the White House, and that is, you know, sending asylum seekers and others who are nabbed at the border to sanctuary cities, as they are branded and not defined. So we'll catch up again early next week with the balance of what has been flushed out of the hundreds of pages in the Mueller report. You got all that? Good. All right. In the meantime, I'm always enjoying the idea that we have Deborah Gonzalez here. You'll meet her in a second. She's really smart on this stuff, and I think pretty fair-minded. An advocate, no doubt, but pretty fair-minded and can really kind of cut to the acute legal and practical issues. Let me just remind you about this conversation that still is important. Here's a headline that reflects on what the White House was suggesting, pretty ad lib in nature, first from a tweet. Of course, Sarah Sanders always has to run in behind and legitimize that which the president has burped up. Here's the foundation for the story.
President Trump says he can send an unlimited supply of migrants from the border to so-called sanctuary cities.
They're always saying they have open arms. Let's see if they have open arms.
Unless Democrats agree to his immigration policies, like the border wall.
The alternative is to change the laws, and we can do it very, very quickly.
President Trump says he wants to send immigrants to places like Speaker Nancy Pelosi's district in San Francisco.
That is unworthy of the presidency of the United States and disrespectful of the challenges that we face.
Sanctuary cities have chosen not to work with federal immigration officials to arrest and deport undocumented immigrants. Democrats say instead of making threats, President Trump should work with them to fix America's immigration laws.
The idea that the administration thought in any way that it would be acceptable to use families and children, human beings, as political retribution against their enemies should infuriate every American.
The mayor of Oakland, California, which is a sanctuary city, says immigrants make cities safer.
The data is very clear that immigrants and even undocumented immigrants commit far fewer crimes than non-immigrants.
The Washington Post reports the White House has been talking about sending undocumented migrants to sanctuary cities since November, but immigration officials have refused to go along.
All right, so Deborah Gonzalez is here. She directs the Immigration Law Clinic at Roger Williams. Thank you, my friend, for coming.
My pleasure.
I saw you giggle a little bit when I was talking about my state of mind here. You admitted to me today, and again, we're taping on Thursday. This is yesterday afternoon. It's Friday for you, Thursday afternoon for us. That you blocked it out today.
I can't keep up. Like the Mueller report came out, I'm still thinking about this quote-unquote dumping, and I'm very offended to even say the word dumping of migrants on sanctuary cities. I can't keep up. You know, we're talking about the news. Imagine on the legal side, like every day there is something new. Barr put out, you know, a decision on a case where he overturned 14 years of law on, you know, bond or bail, as it would be commonly known for, you know, asylees. So it's just, I can't keep up.
I made a note of that because that's an integral part of our conversation, and it has barely been mentioned.
Right.
I mean, barely been mentioned. And so the common knowledge on a lot of this stuff is waning more and more, and I think that's part of what I want to accomplish here. So let's start from scratch. Sarah Sanders was talking about, she picked up the president's tweet and then his embellishment about his sanctuary city disbursement idea. You call it dumping, I know why. You know what's fascinating about this is that they actually, to the White House credit, studied this 6 months ago and then 3 months ago. And somebody smart finally said, hey, Miller, I don't know what you want to get done, the advisor to the president mostly on this, but you can't do this. I mean, we'll be in court on half a day one. Doesn't prevent the president from floating it out there. I guess we should start with your, as best you can, 60-second executive summary of what you think about what has been suggested. Then I want to go back and just lay some groundwork about what the facts are in the travel of people who have been coming over and what the processes are. So what is your gut check on this, and then we'll develop it. Okay, we'll be right back. I know this is
a stupid comment. You know, to say that you're going to, you know, in his words were dump, very, very clearly, those are not my words, right, that they would transport these undocumented folks to cities that are considered sanctuary cities. When you said at the beginning of the show, there is no definition, so I don't really know what a sanctuary city is, but be that as it may.
It's political.
No doubt about it, and I think the reason why he says the things he says is because we are now almost in full bloom of another election cycle. He's speaking to his base, right? He's firing heads of ICE, heads of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, because they're not being tough enough. You know, he's the man of law and order, and yet he doesn't follow the law himself. To speak to the idea that he would be able to transport folks from the border to various sanctuary cities, and let's say Providence, Rhode Island, for the sake of this discussion, right, that he's going to transfer folks here. What exactly are they doing? Are they leaving them at the border, like at the Seekonk East Providence line? Are they bringing them to the Providence in front of City Hall and leaving them there? Are they putting them at the Wyatt detention facility, which in and of itself is a problem on its own? We will talk about that today.
That for criminals, by the way. Now you can say, well, they're criminals for illegal. Yeah. We get that, but sometimes there's a civil and criminal infraction that needs to be defined when it comes to the folks that you deal with every day. Civil, make sure I get this right, because sometimes I conflate the two. The criminal violation, which is a misdemeanor, is what?
Is the re-entry after a removal order. So somebody who's been inside of the so entering without proper documents is a civil violation.
Civil violation.
Right, that's why we put them in these deportation proceedings. But once the person is deported, right, an immigration judge says, no, you have to go back to your home country, you're not entitled to any relief.
And you don't.
And you leave, but then re-enter.
So re-entry is the only criminal violation?
It would be the criminal violation.
Okay, so
not everybody's
Wyatt, by the way, is a criminal detention center, so this doesn't qualify.
Well, they've started housing ICE detainees recently, right? So,
but most ICE detainees, well, under the old days, in good faith, it used to be they were suspected to be criminal.
Right, but these folks have been housed at the Wyatt detention facility because of the southern border crisis. So this is as a direct result of the policy.
New travel of folks?
Of new folks coming in, right, that are being...
How many we have there?
Well,
they have capacity.
When they first came in, you know, I think late February, early March, we had 120. And then, you know, there was a visit, and then there were 60, and then I actually went in and visited, and there were 20. And from what I understand, there may not be any at this moment.
People who sought asylum or who snuck over?
Who came into the United States, surrendered themselves at the border, asked for a credible fear interview to determine whether or not they actually are in fear of returning to their home country, were not granted a credible fear interview because there aren't enough resources at the southern border for that to happen, and then were housed at the Wyatt detention facility while they await their ability to have their credible fear interview.
Credible fear, a category of asylum request?
No, not really. So it's like that first determination. So let me back up for a minute and just explain the procedural legalities, if I may.
We're going to break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to back up and explain the procedural realities, if she may, which is what I wanted to do first, but this whole thing is just so fast. We'll be right back.
They support open borders, they support sanctuary cities. So let's spread out some of that burden and let's put it in some of those other locations if that's what they want to see happen and are refusing to actually help fix the problem.
Whether it's catch and release or chain migration or any of them, the asylum laws are absolutely insane.
I would love to sit the president down, forget Sarah Sanders, and see if he could pass a test on actually what the asylum laws are. No, I mean, you laugh, but I bet you he couldn't.
I'll bet you he couldn't.
You know, so all he knows is that he's been understood to say they're crazy, and what he wants to do, and the laws don't match up. All right, we kind of dug into the
procedure
or the fantasy that he has about being able to disperse people throughout the country. But go back to procedure. The categories of people that are coming across the border, infiltrating the country, are who?
They are, generally speaking, Central Americans from the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. These people are fleeing, for the most part, gang violence, poverty, political corruption, domestic violence.
Which is a big one. Being a woman in these countries is not easy.
Not easy. And, you know, political corruption is huge in Honduras. And the Department of State, that's not me. The United States Department of State puts out reports every year. Feel free to read a report from the Department of State from any one of these countries, and you will see violence and corruption, political corruption, are big items.
Because the president, on one of his flailing ideas, is to defund those countries from any aid. I don't know how that's going to help the problem.
I don't know. I don't think that helps at all. But
well, it puts the onus on the country to clean its act up, which is going to create.
But they're all corrupt.
They're all corrupt anyway.
How are you going to clean that up?
Right.
Right. We should be investing money, if we're going to give money at all anywhere.
Okay.
Right, is invest money in those countries so that they can clean up their corruption, or so that they can have the infrastructure to really prosecute the criminal element there.
Well, you're not part of the Secretary of State's office, but I'll ask you this. I mean, what incentive do those countries' governments have with more money to actually do better? Is there an element of governance there that actually knows that the corruption is beyond their control, or are they central to it, and so you give them more money and they just perpetuate the problem?
It could be, right? I mean, I think then there's this whole issue of what does their political society look like? What is their democratic policies, or and will they have fair elections? I can't speak to that, Dan. That's outside of the purview of what I know.
Sure.
But I do think that if the United States really helped these countries to eliminate the criminal violence that they have there, and to bring up their communities, to have more jobs so that they can do more agriculture. Every client I have says to me that they work in agriculture. Everybody's growing beans. Everybody's growing beans. What are you doing with all the beans? Why aren't we selling the beans? Can we do something with the beans? There's got to be something that all of this agriculture could be happening. I mean, I know you're laughing, but I am very serious. How are we not helping these countries so that the people that live there could feel safe, so that the people that live there could have a job and not want to leave?
Okay, so given all of that, that's the sourcing of the rise in the admitted numbers that have increased back to 2007 levels for people who are being detained or arrested at the border. Amnesty, sneaking, credible
fear.
Credible fear. Let me write that down. Three are those the three categories?
Right. So people come to the United States. They're at the border. Joe Schmo's at the border. Most of these people, all of these people, clearly are surrendering themselves. That's why we're hearing about lines at the ports of entry.
Right.
Right. Are surrendering themselves to the ICE, to the CBP officers, Custom Border Patrol officers, and saying, "I'm afraid to go back to the home country." By law, the Custom Border Patrol has to give that person what's called a credible fear interview. A credible fear interview is an asylum officer that comes out and just talks to the person to determine whether or not the fear is credible. Are they believable? And in most times they are, of course. You know, these people are fleeing gangs, they're fleeing poverty. They are.
They've got children with them.
They got kids with them. They're bringing their kids. They're making a 2,000-mile trek to the United States.
By the way, not to distract you for a second, but the other reason I've been floating just instinctively over this is, in addition to the strife in the three countries you mentioned, The other float that he had to defloat or deflate 2 weeks ago about closing the border completely must have accelerated some traffic, because it's, if you get it now or don't. Do you think that's true, or am I wrong about that?
It might have. I don't really know. There's such a bottleneck at the border happening right now that I don't know that actually ended up happening.
All right. So with those three, so with the categories of people there, here's what most people don't understand, myself included sometimes. The processing is, okay, so you're going to get an interview, or you're going to get a 20-day hold, because federal law only allows for 20 days, and then you're given a court date and a please come back notice, correct? And then you just disperse, and where you disperse to is highly informative as to whether or not we're going to see that person come back to the court. If you disperse down the road in Phoenix or Dallas, maybe you're going to come back, but if you end up in Providence, you're probably not coming back.
Why
Correct?
would you send somebody to Providence when they're
No, but if they do that, if they get there on their own,
yeah.
if they get there on their own.
Possibly, right? Because the studies have shown that 98% of the people showing up at the border are applying for asylum, and only a single-digit percentages are being approved.
So that's
Right.
how, in part, we've gotten the high, whatever the real number is, of millions of undocumented or illegal immigrants in this country, correct? Okay, so that, okay, so.
Going back to the process, if I may.
Please.
Right? Person comes in, they're at the border, I'm afraid to come back. Officer has to give them credible fear. Today, right now, at the border, government, right, with the Homeland Security Advisory Council, who put out a report on April 15th, saying that there's a crisis at the border, that there's a bottleneck, they don't have enough officers to conduct these credible fear interviews, they don't have enough beds for them to actually detain these families. And the 20 days that you're talking about are for families that are coming in with kids because of the Flores v. DHS settlement that says that kids can't be detained for a period of time because DHS doesn't know what they're doing with kids. Hello, Department of Homeland Security doesn't take care of children. That's clear, right? So we shouldn't be allowing DHS to detain children. That's why the 20 days. So what do? For people who do not have kids, those folks are detained. And they are given a credible fear interview. If credible fear is found, meaning that they are credible, then they go before an immigration judge that then allows them to apply for asylum in front of the judge while they are being detained. If it is a family, they release the family because under the Flores settlement, they can't hold the children for more than 20 days. What's happening, though, is that a lot of these folks are being released because there's no beds. There is no place to put them.
And what is the message upon release?
Well, so presumably, no. So upon their release, they let ICE know wherever they're going. So for the folks that come to Rhode Island, for example, they have to report to the ICE office. They have to give an address of where they're going to go. They have to report to the ICE office immediately. The ICE office, in most instances, will either place an ankle bracelet on them or require them to report twice a week to the ICE office in Warwick while the case is moving forward.
And does
in the
ICE
immigration
actually
court.
investigate how they're doing, where they're
Oh
staying?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Who you're with?
You don't. Yes. Well, they're not investigating who you're with because they wouldn't have the resources sufficiently. At least I don't think they do, to go to everybody's house and investigate who's inside the house. I personally would think that's unfair too to the people that are living in the house who have been here for a long time. But as far as I know, as of right now, they don't do that. The person will go to the ICE office and.
All right. So you can advise that you decided, I'm going to Providence because I have family there, or because I heard they have water fire. When we come back, we'll talk about again the folly of this disbursement strategy. Stay with us.
I've spoken out about Providence being a sanctuary city. We know that cities that have more immigrants have lower crime. We know that immigrants are less likely to commit a crime than natives. And so we're really blessed here in the city of Providence. Over the past 4 years, we've seen dramatic decreases in violent crime in the city, and the most violent crimes in the city. So homicides, the lowest rate they've been in 34 years. Shootings down 30%, burglary down 30%. We're heading in the right direction, but we're not satisfied. There's so much more work left to do. And working with the amazing partners in public safety and our community, that's how we're going to continue to drive crime down and keep all of our residents safe.
Well, it's a lengthy piece of audio from 2018. I got my own challenges with the mayor. You know, back in 2018, we had one mayor in Cranston who polices exactly the same way that they police in Providence. The mayor in Providence is like, I'm sanctuary. The mayor in Cranston is running for governor as Republican, saying we're not sanctuary, and all the fact pattern of how the cops do their job is exactly the same. Ridiculous. It's a political definition. So I think you and I can agree, it's just laugh out loud stupid to even start analyzing the logistics of the travel of these people sponsored by the government, because it's not going to happen just because he tweeted and then mumbled about it.
Correct.
But what do you think the ramifications are? See, because it seems to me that rumor and the presidential chatter really do affect people.
Oh, yes.
Right? Give me 90 seconds on what damage or benefit may have come from this, if anything.
From the chatter, you mean?
Yes.
I don't think that benefits at all. I mean, I think that only benefits his base, who's going to really believe that he's being tough on immigration. I mean, you know,
But by the way, I think the base. Not to interrupt. I think they're confused. You know, this is the guy who's belittling sanctuary cities, and now he's going, "Hey, you want to be one? Here you go. Prove it." What does that have to do with security?
Nothing. Nothing.
Say, oh, you want to be one? You're on the list? You a Lorza? Here, prove it.
He's not speaking as a president. He's not speaking as a leader.
So there is no upside?
No.
So what's 30 seconds on the downside? What are you most worried about?
You know, he worries. The whole conversation really goes downhill. It's impossible for people to talk about immigration without it being sided, without it being partisan, right? You're either for immigration or you're against immigration, and if you're for it, you might be viewed as
I'm against illegal immigration.
Oh my God, there is no such thing as illegal. There's no such thing. A person can't be illegal.
They're breaking the law.
They're not breaking the law. The law isn't conducive to them obtaining the documents.
You're a bleeding heart liberal.
Maybe,
Latino.
Whatever. Maybe I am. But right, if we're going to have laws, then let's have laws that make sense. Let's
Latina.
not. Thank you. Or Latinx, as some people now say. Right? We need to have laws that make sense. If we're going to have laws, we need to follow the laws. Here we have a president that neither knows the law nor follows it.
All right. Come back when it starts to make sense.
When? It's never. I don't know, Dan.
I don't know.
You invite me and we'll see how it goes.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Final word when we come back. Oh, there we go. I just was working on some notes for Monday. Did you hear what I said would be terrific? I bet you didn't. Anyway, you have a great Easter. Remember, there's no Easter without Good Friday. And heck, I forgot to mention it was Good Friday because, you know, we taped the show on Thursday. Told you at the top of the show. It's my state of mind. There'll be more on the Mueller reports on the Monday show. That I can almost guarantee. And we'll talk to you on the radio at 3 until 6 each weekday on WPRO. Happy Easter. Yep.